Hi, I'm 5FM's Leah Jazz, and it's Women's Month, so we're going to have a chat to some of South Africa's feminists.
I'm Sibs Matiyela.
Would you guys like to introduce yourselves?
I am Dela Gwala. I often describe myself as a full-time feminist and activist writer, and I work for an organization called the Restitution Foundation.
Hello, I am Nobantu Shabangu. I'm a writer, genderqueer person, and I write essays on feminism and other nice things.
Cool. My pronouns are she, her, or they, them.
My pronouns are she, her.
My pronouns are she, her.
My pronouns are they, them.
So how are you guys actually doing? I mean, Women's Month, there can be an issue fatigue, or rather an activism fatigue that comes with everybody shouting about Women's Month for 1 month of the year.
It's a lot. Mm-hmm. It's a lot. So I think we just want to find out first and foremost. We care. How are you?
I think this particular month, I've been thinking a lot about how Women's Month is just used to sell us things, and is sort of tagged on to like ads and a very vague idea of women's empowerment, and a very vague idea of appreciating women. And I think this year I've been thinking a lot more about the historical context of it, that women gathered in order for Black women to have freedom of movement. And I think within the context of Black Lives Matter and sort of the struggle for racial justice that's gotten a lot of attention now, I've been thinking a lot about Black women's lives and lived experiences in South Africa, and how Women's Month, the historical context of that's who people were fighting for and that's who the solidarity was for, how that has just, it seems to be just it's like a footnote. It's like, by the way, 1956 people marched, and even the you strike a woman, you strike a rock, sort of throwing that phrase out there. And I'm quite grateful that throughout the years, a lot of activism that women have done and that have happened in feminist spaces have talked about, yes, you strike a woman, you strike a rock, but also people are allowed to be full human beings. You can't be the rock the whole time.
So you're tired?
I'm tired. All that to say is all the women in me are tired.
Got you. Nobantu, how are you feeling?
I'm also thinking about the historical significance of this day, and also just thinking I'm in a critical reflection for myself as well, to say, as a queer person, how do I fit my narrative into this movement and how do I take it forward? Please forgive my history. It was in 1956 that all women, Indian, Black, white, marched for the freedom of rights against the Dompas Pass, because men wouldn't. So the women had to do it for themselves, And so I'm just in the critical reflection point of thinking of with the queer identity and 2020 going forward with lockdown, looking at feminism and having a youth face, Abo Zulega, So just thinking about that and how can we move forward, like literally just, I feel like we're a bit stuck at the moment.
How are you feeling?
I'm kind of inspired in a way, because we are, as you say, at such a critical point in our own history. And I think it's really inspiring how during a time where women, and not just women, but people, racism was in your face. Systemic racism wasn't subtle like it is today. It was in your face. It was legislated. It was signposted everywhere. And to be agitated to that point where you actually take action, I think is so inspiring, because at the moment I feel a lot of activism is taking place online. And I'm like, how do we organize ourselves as women, like people did back in the 50s, to go and actually do something and make a statement? I think I'm feeling like I want to channel that energy and go, how do we make that happen today?
Yeah.
How are you?
I'm tired. All the women in me are tired. But I think similarly, I'm tired of being tired as well. I'm tired of being angry. I'm tired of being upset. I'm tired of being hysterical. I'm tired of being labeled. I'm tired of not being listened to. I'm tired of people saying they stand for one thing and not doing those things in our names. So I'm tired of hypocrisy and a lot of things. But what I'd like to do is, further than this point and this month, is to push forward past the fatigue to a point where I don't know how I can do it as an individual myself. Because it becomes difficult. You're like, do I join an organization, like some kind of movement, some kind of women's league? Like, what is it that I, Sibs, can do to effect some kind of positive change and to push past the fatigue and go, I can do something. I can add value to this movement. I need to push past and find my why, and then try and incorporate joy into that so that we can all keep moving forward. It's funny to me that Leah and I are doing this particular, we're leading this panel. We got this email from work, which is 5FM, and the email said, as one of the foremost feminists at 5FM, we'd really like you. And I remember sitting in my lounge, I didn't have trousers on, and I was like, I don't know why that's important.
Anecdotal, essential, that everyone needs to know.
Like context, because COVID, no one has trousers on. And I'm sitting in my house.
Right now.
Yeah, no one knows. And I thought to myself, if I'm one of the foremost feminists, it means that we don't have feminists yet, because I'm definitely beginner to intermediary. I've never read bell hooks, or I've only read one Toni Morrison book, so it's I don't know, I can't be the leader of feminists yet. And then it's who is a feminist? What is a feminist? Why? How are we engaging with this thing? And I guess that's another thing I just wanted to ask you guys, do you identify as feminist, and how did you come by feminism?
I do identify as feminist, and I have been sort of taking on that title or that label or that way of identification for probably maybe at this point 7 years or something like that. And I guess I'm one of the people who has a very specific moment that they remember why that label became important to them. And for me, it was a personal experience of trauma that made me look for a space where people believed survivors of sexual violence. That's what led me to sort of diving into feminist thinking, sort of feminist spaces, was looking for spaces where survivors of sexual violence were believed, where their trauma was taken seriously. And that's also what led to feminist activism for me. And I guess I should say the thinking that really spoke to me was sort of intersectional feminism, Black feminism, feminisms that identify that people are not one thing. They're an intersection of various identities, and all of those come into play when you're trying to sort of live in the world. That is sufficient for now, because I'm this is not a lecture, this is a conversation.
But that's
so we can definitely pass the mic at this moment.
But that's also the process of feminism, right? Because it's not a static thing. It's something that requires you constantly learn and change and grow and learn about other people and other identities. And for me, as a white person, learning about my own privilege in the place of feminism was important, because I know my struggle is not your struggle, but it's important for me to be aware of what that is, and to, within my feminism, find space to hold space and allow and listen.
Yeah. So my essay in Living While Feminist, a compilation by Jen Thorpe.
Love Jen. Shout out Jen.
Yeah. So the essay is titled "A Decade of Feminism," and I was reflecting on my own journey on a whole decade of just identifying as a feminist. I never belonged as a teenager because of my sexual identity, and my identity to my body was not, concurrent with what the features that are there. So I've been gendered by society, and I've been put into this category called woman, right? But looking at society and looking at how the women in my family were quite contradictory in their ways, very fierce, powerful women. But when men came, suddenly things changed, right? And I don't know. This is my fierce aunt. What happened now? My aunt is no longer this fierce person that I know, you know? And so feminism was at home for me to say, even if you don't feel particularly like this gender, we are fighting for this, for even if you are gendered by us, and that's something else. This movement fights for your rights, for your voice, for your fierceness, not to be policed, and for that. So I'm very comfortable in that label. I'm comfortable, and it's been a journey for me as well. It's like developing and changing in it, and it's okay. It's lovely how it also changes. It also accommodates with time and events that change over time. It also accommodates more people. So yeah.
Do you think that the evolution of feminism, particularly in recent years and in the last 10 years, has assisted you in terms of your identity becoming more public facing?
Yeah, definitely. That's a good point. Yeah, it has. It has. Queer feminism as well, like the queer influence, the queer community's influence in feminism has expanded feminism itself and really gave it a robust, like dimensions and movement. It's more able to thrive in this new environment, where there's more, when there's like the environment is not static, as you said, it's not stagnant.
Do we think there's such a thing as perfect feminism?
Whew. I reflected with my friends who also identify as queer and as trans, non-binary, and all of that. Some of them have left their label over the years. They've just divorced feminism. Some of them are like they don't know. So there's no perfect feminism. Hence, I think I said in the beginning, I'm at a critical reflection point where it's like, yeah. So what now? There's no perfect feminism, but the work of feminist movements must not be what's it called, like relegated to the side. So
I think that's a really important point to make, that the work needs to continue and mustn't stop. What I find is that a lot of people are intimidated by feminism, especially like if you look online, right? And where this sort of perfect feminist idea comes in is that we can start these discussions and then eventually people sort of opt out because it's an intimidating space. And if you don't have the perfect politics, if you don't say the perfect thing, if it's almost like there's tiers now to feminism, and there's some kind of hierarchy where now you are an expert because you write, and then you also have a Black Women Caucus, whatever, or I'm using that as an example, but like there are many movements and organizations. Like you're heavily involved. Feminism is your work, it's your life, you eat, breathe, sleep it. And then now, where it was feminism. Whereas the rest of us are like, I just like, in my own space, like I just want to fight for equality for like, so I'm trying to do the work, but like I don't have the language, I don't speak the academic jargon, I don't know what certain things mean. I would like to learn, but there's this fear to sort of say out loud, I don't know everything. And I don't even know if I'm on the right track, because it's almost like once you admit to something like that, then your feminism doesn't count, or it's not enough, or someone must silence you in quite a violent way. Because in as much as, like you were saying, Dela, like it's an umbrella, and there's lots of aspects to feminism, but we're not kumbaya, we're all, there's so many different lived experiences of the thing, where intersectionality becomes like a must, like, you're a white woman, sometimes you must, and for me, it just becomes such a tricky space where now it's almost like people are pushed away from something that should be a collective effort because of this hierarchy or bullying or
the fear of being cancelled.
Yeah.
You say the wrong thing, or think the wrong thing.
I think when you were saying that, that's like cancel culture, or sort of calling in versus calling out, like all of those ideas were coming to mind.
What is calling in?
Well, I guess most calling out is seen as like, I guess maybe it's publicly shaming people, publicly calling people out. And calling in usually entails like sending someone a private message and saying, listen, I think you need to reconsider what you said, or I think you need to reconsider what you're putting out there. And a lot of people advocate for calling in versus calling out.
Never heard of it. Love it.
Like calling in. But I think that also comes from like a space of trust. I think usually calling in comes when you have some kind of relationship with that person, and you know they need a little bit more information in order to sort of move away from whatever it is that they were putting across. I think it's probably why I stay like a little bit away from Twitter, because I find that space so intense in what you were saying, and it can
aggressive even.
It can be a space where people feel like they're not even given a chance to sort of make the mistakes that come with learning.
Which is important, because you can't unlearn without...
Sometimes like those mistakes can be really harmful to people who have heard certain things, or depending, I think it also depends on what that person is saying and what that mistake is. So it's like I think I go back and forth, because I think it's beautiful to have people say, I don't know.
Yeah, it can be performative at a point, especially when it's online, when everybody's trying to be the biggest feminist dick in the Twitter streets. It's like, what are you actually doing?
Yeah.
Nobantu, when you say some of your friends abandoned it altogether, like why? What were those reasons?
So I came to feminism when I was like 18 or 19. And so if you count a decade, a lot has happened. Some of them have husbands now. Some of them.
We'll keep them in our thoughts and prayers.
So some of them think it was like a phase, you know, which kind of
when I was a feminist in college, I mean, I really experimented.
I dabbled here and there in feminism. But the thing I was thinking about now is that there is a difficulty already as a woman in navigating the world that we live in, based on the things that we were taught. Patriarchy is very real. We've all grown up in this society, and especially as Black African women, this is how a woman must be, this is how a girl must be, this is how you must treat, all of these lessons that you personally could have been shaking your head the entire time and going, man, but this thing. But at the same time, you're still gonna have to go home and live in this society and live with these people. And it becomes difficult, especially when you're the only person who is like you in that space, or who thinks like that, to now always be fighting or defending something, or like standing up for something. It's exhausting. There's no way at Christmas time now I'm with my uncles and my aunts and like everyone's there. Kumnandi, it's a vibe. Sibs is killing the vibe, because I'm like, actually, you shouldn't talk about women like that. And malume, like the way you treat Uzbanman is not okay. And my pronouns are this and this, malume. Like for someone who's determined not to understand, also because they don't have to, because the world has always worked in a way that suits their narrative. It's hard. So this thing of this person taking off their feminist coat is completely understandable, because what kind of support do we even offer each other in real life and in real time?
I think...
Can I come into that, what you're saying about
absolutely
the whole feminist code thing, and you living at home and you can't tell your uncle not to sexualize your 9-year-old niece, because especially in Zulu culture, it's apparently a good thing when you're like 9 years old and the men are like, oh, you look beautiful, you're going to make a good wife, and then they comment on your hips and whatever, It has its cultural origins, which were at one point valued, and that's another conversation. But the woman of the feminist code, I just thought, what if at one point she's abused? She can't now come back to the feminist groups and say, I need your help. In the same vein, the feminist groups will be fighting in her name, but when she was busy articulating these difficulties of postulating her position as a feminist, there was no support. It was just attack, attack, attack. So yeah, it really is complicated.
Yeah, I just want to jump in with what Nobantu is saying. Sometimes you're going to be that person that ruins Christmas. Like, I have definitely been that person where everyone is just trying to eat cake and you are busy arguing about class privilege. Like, I have definitely been that person multiple times. And at the end of the day, it really doesn't feel good being that person. And
no, it doesn't. It's lonely.
Yeah. And it is lonely, and you will get disciplined by even the women in the family will tell you, listen, you have to play nice, like you're making things uncomfortable for everybody. And I think at some point I was really obsessed with, there's a writer, Glennon Doyle, and she says that revolution begins at the kitchen table. So I just always go back to that idea that revolution, sometimes people have this huge idea that it is like thousands of people marching in the street and it is people sort of like taking over a government. But sometimes the most transformative work happens when you have those really uncomfortable conversations. And it doesn't mean having those conversations is going to radically change your uncle's point of view or your aunt's point of view, or even make people, like, I guess, respect or see what you stand for. But I think Nobantu is right in it can plant a seed. It can plant a seed where a couple of years later, someone in your family actually is able to come to you and say, I have this issue, or someone is treating me a specific way, or I'm being abused in whatever way. You become that person that even in that moment when no one is on your side, at some point you might be that aunt that someone can turn to. You might be that aunt.
What's significant to me is that you seem to have to create the safe space that you want. You have to create the safe space that you want because you're not seeing it anywhere else. And like you say, you will become that aunt for somebody in the future. And I think that's part of what you were saying when it comes to the joy, and is the security in knowing that maybe you're the pioneer, but you won't be the only one.
Forever,
yeah. Because you've got nieces and nephews or young people in your life who are going to need somebody to speak to like you didn't.
Yeah.
And that's what this evolution is, and that's what it's for.
Hey.
Anyway.
It does feel like that, though, that it does feel like that. And I think we do people no favors by making them feel like this work isn't going to really try you and test you in so many ways.
Trying to speak to a super colonial family who come from what they still call Rhodesia, about like not being racist, guys. Can we just? It's not the same. It's not the same as being the only feminist in a heavily patriarchal culture. But I can kind of relate on that point.
Yeah.
Nobantu?
I forgot. No, it's fine. I was going to.
Sorry. Me and my white feminism interrupting again.
You're taking up space.
Intersectional!
I was going to say it's also quite complicated because yes, Dela, you are disrupting the family.
Christmas. She said Christmas.
Yeah, it was.
Mm-hmm. She ruined Christmas.
You know that 1 year when everyone must be joyous, you are there.
It's the most wonderful time of the year, Dela.
But it's sort of weird because families have a sort of love-hate relationship with strong women in the family, right? And that's just something I'm just saying.
Because they need them. They need them.
Yeah, but it's an unfair love. It's like a love-hate. It's like, oh, we'll use you here and there, yeah. So it's just a thought that I had about that. But yeah, and what you were saying about finding joy in it, I really find joy in it, and having those conversations where people get that aha moment. Like feminism is not a man-hating, for me, it's not a man-hating, gender-hating thing. It's like there are certain filters that we've been put in front of our eyes, and feminism is taking them off one by one, and saying, it makes absolutely no sense that when Dela, you're pregnant, your husband gets 25% pay raise, but you get nothing. And it's still happening to this day.
And I think that's a great point. Feminists don't hate men, hey?
Some do, let's be honest. Some do.
But that's not their definition.
I'm not gonna lie. I might be on that boat, but we're not talking about that right now. But it's not about, the feminism isn't about hating men.
Yeah, the movement
It's about wanting to be equals. That's all. Fuck you. Pay me how much you pay a white dude who does the exact same thing as me. Do you know what I mean? Like, let's both cook at home, babes. Let's both do the washing and the ironing.
You're not helping me with chores. You're cleaning your own house.
You're not babysitting your child. You're parenting.
Yes.
Oh my goodness, I'm a feminist and I never thought about that. Like, you're not helping me with chores, it's your house.
You're not helping me with the dishes. You do wash your own dish, man. That's not my job, it's our job.
Oh, wow.
I think with that whole sort of man-hating thing, I guess one part of me just always hates that we always need to have that discussion. But on the other hand, it's more like I wish men could imagine their lives beyond violent and toxic masculinity. Like, can you imagine how full and interesting and amazing and creative and how much freedom you would have if you didn't have this little box of what it means to be a man, this little box that allows you, I don't know, the emotional range of like a pinky finger where the only thing you're allowed to feel is anger. Can you imagine what an incredible life or choices you would have if you weren't trying to negotiate this very, very violent and toxic understanding of what it means to be a man?
I think that feminism is for men as well. And that actually kind of goes back to the first question of, do we all identify as feminists? Does the word feminism really encompass what we are and how we feel? And I think that if men were aware of how feminism could benefit their lives by dismantling patriarchy, by taking away that toxic masculine box that men feel that they need to reside in, their lives could be so much richer. Their range could be so much more expansive.
You could be so much more interesting, Skumbuzo.
Just go to therapy.
Do the work.
Do the work.
Deal with your trauma. Like,
right.
Maybe they don't understand that because they are like literally, the pay gap is there. Rape culture is it's women that are at the hand of it. So to really sell them feminism is difficult. And for me, it's not for me to sell them feminism, it's for them to see me as human and as equal. So I'm not necessarily sure if I want them in feminist spaces. I'm still grappling with that. But it is hard to sell to someone who says it doesn't matter. I'm a man. When I walk in, I demand attention. I demand a pay gap, no matter how mediocre I am at my work. I can tell the police officer that this is a domestic issue and the charges are dropped. Literally, there's no places there are no spaces where men do not prosper. So why must I even give this feminism attention? And then why must I give this man who doesn't want to be a man the rights and the voice? And this lesbian or this genderqueer person, I'm living my life. I'm prospering. How am I going to sell it to you?
Living my best.
But at the same time, at some point, men need to be aware of their own impact as being part of the patriarchy, because we can have these discussions. We can sit together as queer people, as women, as femmes, as non-binary people, and have this conversation. But at the end of the day, until we bring in the people who are guilty of inflicting and maintaining patriarchy, then we're really just converting or preaching to the converted.
A lot of people have said this in the fight for racial justice, especially in the American context, where people are like, I am tired of talking about Black pain and anger. I want white people to actually start doing the work and showing up and fighting and really doing the work that it takes to understand their place in the world and to understand why they've benefited from oppression and violence. And I think it's the same for men. I don't want to sell feminism to men, because who has the time? We've got so much going on in our lives. But I want men to show up and say, I don't want to benefit from a system that is about controlling people who are marginalized. I don't want to be part of a system that is about brutalizing other people so that I can benefit.
It's hard because a panel of men talking about feminism or a panel of white people talking about Black people's issues is like also not really conducive. So I think it's about a collective conversation.
This brings me to my next question, actually. So I might get into trouble for the things I'm about to say. It's fine. I accept. Can one of you hire me if this goes awry? To launch Women's Month at the place where we work, where this is going to air, there was a conversation that happened on air between our station manager, our programs manager, and the man who is now the presenter of the Drive Time show. In this conversation, they were kicking off Women's Month and they were saying, okay, you know what, let's be accountable as the perpetrators of like all things anti-women. Let's talk about, you know, sexism in the workplace. Let's talk about keeping our female staff members safe. Let's talk about equality in the workplace, blah, blah, blah. I was triggered by the conversation and upset by it because what was said was about our experiences, but did not actually reflect accurately what our experiences were. So there was talk about, oh no, you know, we really prioritize the upliftment of women. If you look at this particular show, then there's women who work there, and then on the show, everyone contributes, so everyone is an equal. My point was, everyone's not equal. Not everyone has the same amount of airtime, and certainly people don't get paid the same amount for doing that work. So you can't say equality. Then there was, no, we're putting women on the lineup, we're bringing them up. My point was, you took a Black woman off the Drive Time show to replace her with a white man with no explanation. So things like that, where the men come and they say the things, oh, we don't want to be toxic, no toxic masculinity, no sexism in the workplace. And my point was, we're not worried about coming to work and being raped by our colleagues. We're worried about coming to work and not earning the same for the same amount of work as our male colleagues, who seem to be more of a priority than we are, which is what led me to my next question, because the hill I'm willing to die on is the gender pay gap. I know we've got lots of other struggles, a lot of other things going on, but I truly believe that women, as the numerical majority of people, Black women in South Africa, who are also then, statistically speaking, the primary breadwinners in homes across the country, are not earning enough, period, are not earning as much as their male counterparts. We are not in the C-suite. I don't know when I last heard of a woman CEO, CFO, C whatever. Right? You can go, oh, there's a lady, I've got a lady who's my boss. It's not filtering down. I think you appoint one woman in a position of power, and then that, like, it'll trickle down, and then all of the women will be like, yeah, nam. You know, if you look at the places where we live, I don't live in a nice of an apartment as my male colleague. I don't have the same kind of bond that he does. I can't afford the kind of house that he does. Look at the cars that we drive. It's not because I'm financially irresponsible. It's because I'll never make that kind of money. If we look at how much women have when we retire, women retire with less in their retirement annuities and in their pensions than men do, because we never had a chance to catch up, because we've always earned less. So now Black women are not even earning enough, but we're feeding the nation. And we're literally building the nation. And everything is happening on our backs all of the time. So that's the hill I'm always dying on. I'll harp on about it forever and ever and ever and ever until I'm blue in the face, until I have no more breath left. My hill is the gender pay gap. Whew. What's the hill? What's the hill you want to die on?
I guess the hill I want to die on is I want sort of women, gender non-binary folk, queer folk, trans folk to live in a world where they're not constantly threatened by violence. Like, I want all sort of marginalized folk to live in a world where they have freedom of movement, where you don't have to live in a constant policing of, can I walk here? Can I be here? you know, I want sort of, again, women, queer folk, trans folk to like live in a space where they're not constantly thinking about threat.
I think the hill that I will summit, not die on, I'm joking. The hill that I will summit.
Okay, let's not die. We're trying not to die. Let's not die.
Yeah, guys. Too many women have died.
Yeah.
Trans women are women, right? And they belong in the feminist movement. And with you, Sibs, feminism is an economic like discourse, and is not a discourse only, but praxis as something that is active in economic management, you know, and manage, and even in academia, management sciences as well. Like feminism has to be in there, you know, so that those men who are being taught to be future CEOs can understand, you know, what is happening. So I totally get you about the gender pay gap, you know, because even when they do use tokenism, the woman might be paid 25% less. So those are the hills that I would like to see summited, and we finish it. You know, things must now, it must be done.
Leah?
For me, a big part of my feminism is the body politics. So your body is your body, consent, safe spaces, and also pleasure, femme pleasure. I mean, we wax lyrical about how we're not safe, about how we don't get paid as much, but when do we ever take the time to go, I want to prioritize the pleasure of women? Because actually, it's not all about suffering. It's not all about the hill we're going to die on. It's maybe about the hill we're going to have an orgasm on, you know?
Yes!
Let's prioritize our pleasure. Let's speak about our pleasure. Let's be comfortable with our bodies.
Give me my O's.
Let's be comfortable with our bodies. Let's prioritize speaking about the things that we want, not just in the workplace, but in bed, in every situation, setting your boundaries, being aware of what you want and being able to express that. That for me is my hill, and consent. Please.
Yeah, it would be amazing to live in a world, again, where people who are marginalized don't have to constantly think about survival and actually have the space to think about their pleasure, actually have the space to think about what would make me happy, what do I want, not what do I need to do, or how do I need to navigate. But I mean, people have found joy in celebration amidst survival. I think people have found joy no matter what. And I think it's a particularly special trait about South Africans is celebration will be found. Like no matter what the circumstances, laughter and celebration will be found. And I just, for me, it's just about trying to create more space in the world so that that can become a priority. So we can think about our pleasure, we can think about our orgasms, we can think about the dreams that we have for our own lives.
And the places we want to go. Like my trickiest thing is always trying to figure out, because I love to travel, it's always trying to figure out where I can go as a Black woman, where I'll be safe. And then where I can go with like my girlfriend, where we can kiss and like make out like other people and then not be in danger.
Arrested.
Like it's so tricky. Everyone else can go everywhere in the world. Oh, where are you going to go next? Now I'm going to sit there and think, I want to see the African continent, but if I go to Uganda, then no, Uganda's out. And like, it's just, come on, world.
It's a lot. I also like traveling. And I traveled with a friend of mine who was a guy for a while. And then now I'm thinking of traveling alone, and I'm literally like locked in because he was like sort of that shield, you know. You know, so I was like, as long as he's there, it's fine. I can go to all these other African countries. I can go to the rurals in South Africa, because there are some areas in the Northern Capes where you can't just, you know, appear.
And it shouldn't be like that. You shouldn't need to have a bodyguard in the form of a penis to make you feel safe wherever you are.
I remember I was watching recently Black is King because Beyonce. And I was moved to tears watching the brown skin girl video and then my power video as well. And I remember speaking to my best friend and I said, why am I so touched by this? Like, why am I crying? And she said, it's the idea that a world without like violence and men, where Black women can just be celebrated and be like you know, just in their element and glorious and beautiful and happy and like living is so out of this world that when you see a representation of it in front of you, you want it so badly. And it's just such a beautiful and magnificent thing to see that you wish you could have, but you don't. And I was like, wow, I love Beyonce. That was my moment. I want to talk about the elephant in the country, which, as we know, femicide, GBV. We're dying all of the time. And I think we've appealed to everyone we can appeal to. We've said, the government, help us. Civil society, help us. Perpetrators, stop it. All of the campaigns, all of Gonke, we've tried it, nothing. Are we supposed to sit back and die? Like, I'm confused. Like, what is the way forward? The police minister is more concerned about confiscating people's alcohol than addressing gender-based violence. Then they said, no, we're going to deal with GBV. We're going to have a special committee. And then they gave them cars. I don't know where those cars are or where they were driving to or what happened. In the first week of lockdown, thousands and thousands of calls made to the police department. Help me, I'm being abused in my home. And I'm hopeless. I feel hopeless with regards to this particular thing.
I think the truth of the matter is that women have been marching, like women and non-binary folk have been marching about gender-based violence for years and have been demanding a national plan on gender-based violence for like a decade. And only now it looks like there's going to be like a national plan to actually deal with it. Because I'm thinking back to like, there was a solidarity march in terms of the Global Women's March. There was total shutdown in 2018, which was like a big march. I was at the one at the Union buildings, but it happened all over the world. So people have been, I think, showing up in numbers to say that this is an issue for years. And obviously, I think we can't do that right now because of the pandemic. We can't have a 1956 moment. Maybe we could, but I guess in the current stage of lockdown, protesting is not the main focus in South African politics right now, which is very, very weird in this context, because I think if there's something we're really good at, I think if there's like something we're really good at as South Africans is protest, because when it comes to showing up for whatever issue it is, I think people show up. I think for me, the focus would go back to rape culture in terms of how do we deal with this now? Because I think it would be a different world if someone could show up to the police who have so many issues, but if someone could show up and be believed, if someone would say something online and wouldn't have someone commenting and being like, but what really happened? Or there's two sides to every story.
What were you wearing? Were you drunk?
Or what did she say? How did that person provoke that person and how they end up dead? So I think we would live in a completely different society because institutions are extremely difficult to topple, but actual people showing up and saying, no, I believe you, and this shouldn't have happened to you. If we had an internet or families or friends that would show up and say, no, I believe you, I'm not going to blame you. This is not your fault, or this isn't the fault of the person who was victimized. If that was the society we lived in, at least that would be, I think, step one.
So I think we've discussed that this is work, and it very much is work. But are there some bright sides? What are some wins that you've experienced in your feminism? Let's fill up our cups.
Hi, Nobantu, why are you laughing? Are there no wins?
You are an instigator, Owen.
I am.
You should be in government.
I should.
In fact, Sibs for president.
You are an instigator.
I just need a PPE tender, then I'm in.
Just get the mask. They just like
Wins. Where are your wins?
the wins. The thing is, it's the wins are. I'm laughing because for me, it's very intrinsic wins. Finding community.
Yeah.
Has been forgive me, has been that thing where I find community, where I can literally cry and a voice. Can I tell you something? When I first came to the feminist movement, because I grew up with men, I have like 5 brothers and I was the only girl for a long, long time. So when I came to the spaces, I would find women just weeping, like, you know, these these things, and I'd be like, what's happening? So I wasn't used to, you know, letting emotions out in public and believing that the people around you will hold you and that they'll fight for you somehow. Maybe they'll even go with you to open the case, you know, the police docket case. So that community for me has been something, and that's been the feminist movement since the 50s. There's always a community where you can find a home and where you can learn.
Dela?
I think I agree wholeheartedly with Nobantu that like the support systems and the communities and just that feeling like I'm not crazy. Like there are many people who have experienced this and who have thought this and I'm not wrong. I think so much about living in a patriarchal society is if you step out the bounds, you are wrong. There's something wrong with you. And I think finding a support system that's like, it's not you that's the issue. It's the actual system of society that we're living in that's the issue is so important. And I think I said it a bit earlier, also finding words for your experiences, being like, oh my gosh, other people have been through this and this is the word for like what I've seen or I have experienced or that someone I know is going through. So finding language has also been like a big win for feminism for me. So I think those two things, finding language, finding community, also being able to think and know that things shouldn't be this way and they don't, and we could possibly live in a world where things aren't this way. I think there's a lot of focus in feminist movements of like envisioning a feminist future or trying to like picture what a feminist politics would look like. And I think that is really, the dreaming work is also really important work. Because I think the dreaming work and the like thinking about living a life where pleasure's at the center is also really vital. And I think that's a big win. People might call it wishful thinking, but I think it's like so important.
I think you expressed something when you said, you know, it's not just me. It's for me, the phrase that sums that up is it's not the shark, it's the water. It's the water that I'm swimming in that's infested. You know, it's not the one man who's the problem. It's the society that the man lives in.
I think the win for both of us is being able to do this, is being able to have this conversation. I'm literally, this is going to go on air. I have literally spoken about my bosses. I've criticized the organization that I work for. I've talked all of the shit, all of the nonsense, which is not shit or nonsense. But the fact that we have the freedom to have been able to have this conversation, it's going to be put out on air and there will be no negative repercussions for us is a win. It's a beginning. It's not everything that we want just yet, but it certainly is a start. And so I think just being able to be on this platform and use it to hear your voice, Dela, and yours, Nobantu, there are other people who will watch this and listen to this and say, wow, you know, I'm really glad, or oh, I didn't think of something like this, or you know, I'm so glad someone was able to articulate out loud on this public, very public forum, what I was thinking or what I was feeling or what I was going through. So the win for us is definitely, as broadcasters, being able to do our bit to, you know, push our own little version of activism as well through the medium on which we've chosen to work. And with that, I'd like to thank the two of you so much.
Yeah. Really, it's been amazing to have this conversation with you and with you.
Yeah. Thanks, guys. You really are the best.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for the lively chat. It's been so lively.
Yeah, lively is definitely the word for it.
Yeah.
Really not boring.
So feminism is not boring. It's fun, guys. Feminism is fun.
Yeah.
That's going to be the textbook.
I was going to say,
Yeah.
like, feminism is fun.
Yeah.
Feminism is sexy.
Yeah.
5FM. Watch 5FM TV on YouTube. 5FM.